I'd recently moved into my new apartment the week before Christmas, and I was just settling. The Mercers, the elderly couple in the apartment next to mine, mostly kept to themselves, but whenever I saw them in the elevator or around the building, they were always polite. It was a few days before Christmas, and I was meeting my friend for drinks. As I was locking my door to leave, Mrs. Mercer appeared and asked me about my plans for the evening. I told her it was probably going to be a late one, and she told me she hoped I had a good time. Unfortunately for me, my night didn't turn out that good. My friend drank too much and started being a jerk, so I left early. When the elevator doors opened on my floor and I stepped out into the dark, empty hallway, the lights flickered on, and I saw this shadowy figure rush out of the Mercer's apartment and come toward me. I was a young man, I'd reckon about 20. He clung onto me so tightly he was digging his fingernails into my arms. I tried to pull him off me, but he just gave me this look of pure dread and muttered out, "Don't make me the Christmas feast." Seeing his bloodied clothes and the scratches on his arms took me by surprise. This guy looked a mess. Suddenly, the Mercer's doors opened and both of them appeared and walked over to us. The guy looked terrified and spluttered out, No, please, don't make me the Christmas feast." The Mercers tried to laugh it off and told me he was their nephew who drunk too much eggnog. As they led him back into their apartment, I heard his muffled sobs. I don't know, the whole thing didn't feel right, but I didn't want to have an altercation with them. I hurried to my apartment and pressed my ear to the wall to listen. I could hear this strange singing coming from within. I don't know, something seemed off, but I couldn't call the police and report singing. So I just double-checked if I'd locked my door and then went to bed. The next day I was at the garbage chute when I saw Mrs. Mercer there shoving a plastic bag down it. She was in the same dress she'd been wearing last night, and she had these stained red marks around her mouth. I asked her about her nephew, and she looked at me with this exaggerated smile and told me that he was fine, apart from a headache. As she walked off, I heard her humming something. I recognized that tune. It was the same one I heard through the wall last night. I'd made sure she'd left before I checked the chute, as sometimes stuff got stuck in there and had to be pushed down with a broom. This occasion was no different, and I managed to pull the bag out. I opened it, and inside was a shirt and jeans covered in blood, and a pair of stained sneakers. I remembered that guy wearing the same colored shirt. I knew deep inside that these belonged to him. I took the bag and left. I called the police station on the way, explained to them that it was probably nothing, but I thought I'd best report it. I was on the train to my parents' house when the police called me saying they checked the Mercer's apartment out and everything seemed fine. Their nephew had just fallen over, and that's why his clothes were in the trash. They'd spoken to him and confirmed he was okay. I just knew that something wasn't fine. It just didn't add up. When I finally got home after Christmas, I hurried to my apartment, eager not to have any more awkward meetings with the Mercers. I just got in and was unpacking when I heard footsteps and something being pushed under my door. It was an invitation from the Mercers inviting me to their apartment on December 31st for the New Year's feast. All I could think about was the words that guy had said. I don't want to be the Christmas feast. I didn't bother unpacking, and instead, I left that building immediately, and I've never been back to that apartment since. There's something not right about the Mercers. I'm certain of it. It was my last day in the office before Christmas, and after my lunch break, I arrived back at my desk to find a present there. It was a shiny red box, and tied around it was a candy cane-colored ribbon. There was no label on it, but I figured it must have been a present from my office Secret Santa. I threw the present into my work bag and then forgot about it. I was off to my folks' house for Christmas, so the next day when I loaded my presents into my car, I grabbed my work bag to check something and found that gift. I took it out and curious, I gave it a shake. I expected it to rattle or make some sort of sound, but nope, nothing. It sounded empty. I was running late, so I shoved all the presents into the car, including that mystery gift, and then I started driving. To be honest, I completely forgot about it until Christmas Day when I discovered it amongst the pile of presents that I was handing out to my family. They seemed intrigued by my mystery gift, so they watched as I unraveled the ribbon and lifted the lid. The first thing I noticed was the smell. This sickly, sweet aroma seemed to tickle my nostrils and made me feel a little sick. I let out this nervous laugh and started regretting my decision to open this in front of my family. I was freaking out that it would be something rude, but turns out it was something much worse. Stuck to the bottom of the box was a stack of face-down photos. This explained why it didn't make a sound when I shook it. I dug my nail at the tape to loosen it. Entwined around the tape was what I first thought was some sort of thread, but then I realized what it actually was. Hair. Medium brown human hair. I picked up the photos and instantly felt a jolt of horror. The photos were all of me at work. One of me sitting at my desk, eating lunch, talking to colleagues, in meetings. There were even ones of me leaving the restroom. There were about 50 of these pictures. Creepiest of all was that in every single one of those photos, there were red crosses drawn across my eyes. As I was flicking through the photos in complete shock, a note slipped out. Scrawled on it in purple ink were the words, "I'll be watching." I shoved the photos and that hair-entwined tape into the box and shut it. Then I tried to laugh it off to my family by making it out to be a coworker's idea of a joke. I couldn't relax after that. Just knowing someone at work was capable of doing something that messed up completely freaked me out. When I went back to work after the holidays, I showed my boss the photos and asked her if she knew who had my name as their secret Santa. She said that she didn't know and that it looked like a harmless prank to her. Someone had taken photos of me and crossed out my eyes. How was that harmless? As I left her office, all I could think about was how her hair was a similar shade to the hair found in that box. After that, my paranoia got so bad. Anytime a brunette coworker spoke to me, I became really anxious around them, and I completely freaked out when a colleague left a box of cookies on my desk. In the end, it became too much, so I quit that job and moved to a new company. Every Christmas time when I receive a gift, there's always that nagging feeling that it could be from that same person. I guess I'll never know who sent me that creepy present. I just hope that they aren't still out there somewhere, watching me and waiting for the right time to send me another messed up gift. I used to love Christmas as a kid, but now as an adult, not so much. My feelings toward the holiday season were further confirmed last year when something seriously creepy happened to me. It was Christmas Eve, and I was spending it at home doing my last-minute present swapping while watching a Christmas horror movie. My roommates were both with their families, so I was home alone. I was making progress with my gift wrapping when I heard a loud knock on the door. I opened it and saw this man standing there. He was wearing an ill-fitting Santa suit, the once white trimmed fur matted in dirt, and a lopsided Santa hat. He looked at me with this vacant expression and said, "I need to talk to Jared." I politely explained to him that no one named Jared lived here, and he must have the wrong address. He didn't say anything else but turned around and walked off. At this point, although he seemed a little strange, I didn't think too much about it. It was the holiday season. Drunk Santas were the norm. I'd only just sat down when I heard another knock on the door. I thought about ignoring it, but the knocking became more persistent. I groaned under my breath that I was coming, and I trudged over to the door. At this point, I just wanted to be left alone to enjoy my evening in peace. I swung open the door, and standing there was the same man in the dirty Santa suit. He peered at me with the same vacant expression and said, "I need to talk to Jared." My heart started thudding in alarm, but I forced a smile and again politely told him that no one called that lived here. I quickly went to shut the door, but this time, he lunged forward and blocking it with his arm, stared at me and said, "You don't understand. I have to talk to Jared." I was so freaked out that he was going to barge inside my house, but I tried to keep my composure and calmly told him that he'd got the wrong house. He seemed to think about this, then to my relief, he moved his arm away. I slammed the door shut and put the door chain on. I couldn't stop shaking, and I was trying to keep a level head when I heard something. A knock at the door. It started slowly at first, but soon became a continuous series of knocks. I felt terrified he was going to break into my house, so knowing the police would be crazy busy on Christmas Eve, I phoned my neighbor Phoebe and explained what was going on. She told me not to worry and that she'd send Zach, her husband, over to get rid of the belligerent Santa. Zach was a retired football player and built like an ox, so he was definitely not the kind of guy anyone would want to mess with, so I thought this would be the end of it. The knocking continued, so I paced the room nervously. I heard the murmur of voices outside the door and could make out Zach's stern voice telling the man to leave. The knocking stopped and there was an eerie silence. I heard a thudding sound followed by a single grunt. I began to panic as I didn't know what was going on. Then, suddenly, I heard another knock on the door. Even though dread filled me, I couldn't leave Zach out there alone with this crazy man. So I forced myself over to the door, opened it as far as the chain would allow, and peered out. I could only see that Santa man's same vacant expression. I couldn't see anything beyond him. He said again,
"I need to talk to Jared."
He swayed slightly to the side, and that's when I made out a solid shape on the ground behind him, surrounded by a pool of red. It was Zach. I screamed and quickly went to shut the door, but the Santa stuck his fingers through the gap. I slammed the door into them with such force I heard a crunch, but he didn't so much as flinch, and in a steady voice he said,
"I have to talk to Jared."
I rushed inside and called the police. They told me to stay inside until they arrived, but it felt wrong just leaving Zach out there with that lunatic. So I crept over to the door and saw his fingertips still trapped in the jammed shut door. I didn't get it. The chain was on, but his fingers made it impossible to shut the door enough to lock it. He easily could have opened the door enough to pull them free, but he didn't. I made myself creep over to the door, and in one swift movement, I opened it. The fingers slipped out and fell by my feet, causing me to let out a deafening shriek. The Santa had cut his own fingers off and left. I knelt by Zach to check on him and saw that rested lopsided on top of his head and soaked in blood was a Santa hat. Thankfully, Zach made a full recovery, but even though they had some of those crazy man's fingers, the police still haven't traced who he is. I've refused to stay in the house alone since. It's made me feel so on edge knowing he's still out there somewhere.